everybody. I hope you find it useful as we have some really good insights to share based on the journey Ben and BD have had over the past few years. So Ben, why don't you start with just what BD does, and then give folks an overview of that.
Yeah, happy to. So BD is a manufacturer of medical and life science product. We're about 70,000 people globally. Manufacturing product really ranging from very high volume, like syringes, injection molding product, but also going to low volume, like instrumentation, reagent manufacturing. And that's actually the focus where we started deploying Tulip as a solution for high mix, low volume manufacturing sites.
Right. So just hearing that, there is not only variation and volume, you manufacture very different products as well, like reagents to syringes, very, very different.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes from really instrument manufacturing, which is assembly of nuts and bolts and PCBAs and alignment, to reagent manufacturing, which is calculations, chemistry, and then let's say high volume.
Yeah, and actually save lives, so very critical. And just with that, I think it comes with its own challenges of different processes, different mindsets. Can you talk a little bit about that, just based on the product processes as well?
Yeah, let's say the processes are very different between the manufacturing archetypes, so to say. So you have really manual sites, which work currently a lot of based on paper instructions, to fill out manual records. They jump between different systems, between SAP, our calibration systems, in certain cases like homegrown systems for reagent manufacturing. So every site is a little bit different in that field in regards to how much they digitize, how the processes are structured. So there's not a lot of standardization in regards to how batch records are built up and those kind of things.
Got it. Did you say paper, a lot of paper?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that must be a surprise to most of the folks here, especially in regulated industry. So you spoke about paper, and then let's switch gear and move to digitization. How did you think about, what were the problems that folks were facing on the operations, shop floor, and even leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think just from a different perspective, I think the people on the floor are just are overwhelmed by a lot of paperwork. They have to basically you spend a lot of non-value added time. It's not nice to say that, but they're spending time filling out records. They have to make sure everything is filled out, leading to the next level. Let's say all the reviews of everything is completely filled out, double checks that calculations are done correctly, potentially leading to problems when you cannot mitigate missing data. And I think just the tendency that there's more and more checks added to paper records. Just if an error occurs, somebody adds another check on, so the burden for the frontline worker just gets more and more with every problem you run into.
Yeah, that's I've not worked myself a lot in regulated industry, but that is a challenge that I've faced a lot when I was on shop floor and working in manufacturing. So can you share about your digitization approach, lighthouse versus multi-site, and give a little bit of overview of that?
Yeah, we started actually the journey in the thought of we start with one site, develop our standard procedures, templates, and then basically scale it in a relatively short time. So I think we planned for 2 or 3 months between starting with a lighthouse and then rolling it out on a broader perspective. We actually recognized that we take a little bit longer on the procedural side, but we didn't want to hurt our timeline too much. And as we recognized that the app building part is not the challenging part, we actually kicked off multiple projects within short time. So we actually within 3 or 4 months had, I have to recall, 5 sites in parallel working on the pilots.
Okay.
And we typically pick, let's say, on the pilot side, something fairly simple to start with. So obviously there's always the desire to pick something super complex to prove it works and the one with the highest impact first. But we typically encourage to say, okay, start with something simple. There's so many things you have to learn. It's not only how Tulip works. You have to educate your quality teams and to understand how the future looks like. You have to update your QMS in parallel. You have to, in our case, sometimes learn about validation. So there's a lot of things you actually learn anyway on your journey. So don't overwhelm yourself with the most complicated use case to begin with as well.
Yeah, I think you alluded to some of the lessons learned, during that. So just to recap, you started with one site, Lighthouse, made sure that you pick up not too complex use cases, make sure that they're up and running, and then launch in parallel across other sites?
That was the plan. To be honest, we had to change a little bit. Let's say the first line we picked on the pilot side wasn't the simplest.
Yeah.
And that leading actually to the problems that they weren't initially on time. So we actually changed the course of action and deployed on several sites in parallel, but we still were able to deploy a lot of learnings. And one of the learnings for us was really how do we get up to speed more effective? So really working together with Tulip relatively early in the process, having engagements really focused with our teams.
Yeah, I think that was something we discussed. And that's part of like Tulip is easy to use. You feel like, hey, we can get up and running on our own. But I think that partnership that you guys then built with some of the Tulip solution engineers really accelerated. Can you speak a little bit more about that? How did that happen?
Yeah, let's say we in general followed an approach in regards to training where we have our local procedures, which are more like how do we want to do things at BD. We use a lot of the Tulip online trainings, but when we typically did a format, I think it's a different format now, but like a 2 or 3 week engagement with Tulip, where we have like a dedicated solution manager, a project manager, really working through the first use case. And I think that helped us a lot just to have like regular check-ins with the experts, because I think the knowledge base is awesome, and the things I'm usually looking at, but you don't know sometimes what you don't know or what you're looking for. So having somebody guiding you through the first use case, and especially in our case with things like how to use the device history widget, those kind of things, and making sure everything works well is crucial, I think.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, I think at BDU all focused on EDHR, right? That was your sort of rally to like, hey, this is what we are going to focus on. Can you share that and how it has evolved or not evolved over a period of time?
Yeah, let's say EDHR was the key use case. Well, I have to say from the beginning, the plan was to use it basically as almost like the basis and then extended. So thinking about, for me, the separation between DHR and work instruction is somehow due to the fact that it's in paper. So if you go electronic at one point, you want to integrate maybe work instructions. So we always say EDHR is the first layer. Then we're integrating work instructions, and then one go further and further from there. So we had, let's say, use cases based on EDHR. But we also had a situation that the sites just recognize what they can do on their own with Tulip, and they identified other use cases. And can speak to some of those, but they are typically coming from Kaizen events or people just facing problems they're having on their daily life, and they're like, oh, can I just build that? Can you help me getting that over the finish line?
Right. So I think we are segueing into where I was gonna go next. So we had this lighthouse approach, and now where we had this EDHR, where you have created a lot of common standards which the sites can leverage and build upon. And then there is that other piece where Tulip has enabled some of the sites to solve additional use cases, build some more apps. Can you share some examples of that?
Yeah, I think one of the first ones actually, because it's manual sites, so we do a lot of OEE on the equipment side, but let's say we also try to track overall labor effectiveness on our manual side. So one of the first things was that we, instead of doing data recording for that, we built a Tulip app. And it basically developed from the operator just entering how many people are on the floor, how many units they make. It developed to an unknown board, to downtime tracking. So it really evolved from a simple spreadsheet to a Tulip solution, which now enables us to, in an unknown-like manner, track downtimes, inform actually the leadership on a tiered-based approach. So first engineers get an information. If tickets are not solved, leadership gets involved. So it gives us much more transparency on issues on the line. That's one use case, more coming from our BD excellence operational side. And then we have certain use cases where we just address issues of manufacturing. So one of my other favorite examples is, I think everybody knows the shop floor travelers in manufacturing. So we had one site who actually has a batch record system. They print stuff out, and they have their paper records from SAP. And we recognized actually the only thing they don't make any notes on them. They just basically had them with them to track the order and to confirm certain data. And nobody knew where in the plant this order is right now. It traveled with the product. So actually what we did was we built like a solution where we integrated with our ERP system. The operator, when they start, enter a work order number. They start the order. They get all the information they had on the paperwork now electronically. Mm-hmm. And it gives us two advantages. We save a lot of time. We save a lot of paper. And we have, let's say, very good traceability of a product now across the floor. but it would be more on the what we call non-EDHR use case. It's still for us considered GXP, but not as GXP as EDHR.
Right, and some of those known EDHR or like some of these ideas that the sites get, like through Kaizen events you mentioned, from what I've learned in our conversations in the past, the sites leverage Kaizen, continuous improvement, and they like, hey, Tulip can be up and running pretty quickly. Are those apps like citizen developers develop in or in collaboration with COE that you lead?
It depends. It's a little bit because it's also kind of self-marketing sometimes. So I'd say we want the solution for the paper reduction process was something we developed centrally. It's a Kaizen format we have at BD, which is like a 1-week Kaizen, but it has like 8 weeks preparation time. And we actually had the time to basically build the app 8 weeks ahead of time and verify it in the Kaizen event and go live afterwards. So that's something we centrally developed. Yeah. And then we have sites, we have like where they use pick to light to identify the right material in the warehouse, where the site actually develops the apps and then brings them to their Kaizen workshops.
Got it. And typically, you know, how does that, like, I'm going to switch gear, like, so solving problems, both at the site level, both from the COE perspective, like having that focus and alignment. I know you are in GXP, life sciences. Can you talk a little bit about how BD thinks about governance, validation, and how does that integrate with what sites want and the speed which they want?
Yeah, I'd say I think we consider, let's say we use Tulip as a GXP platform, so everything we do in Tulip is considered GXP, and that doesn't matter which use case. So it all goes through our GXP governance, but it starts really, we have like typically like a security risk assessment, which gives us different options in the depth of validation. And depending on the use case, so EDHR falls in a category where we have to go through a very more stepwise approach of approving well plans, doing functional risk assessment, scripting our tests, executing tests, those kind of things, where for simpler use cases we can perform validation basically in one step and then bring them to life. But that manages, let's say, on one side the validation part of it, but also gives us a little bit control on the scope, what we do, making sure we're not duplicating efforts across different sites.
And how do you do that? Have you created like some templates, some feedback mechanism between sites? What were some of the lessons learned and you were rolling it out?
Yeah, we're using, let's say, on one side, the Tulip internal enterprise share library. So if we see something which is good, we put it on this shared library for development. We at BD also have like a best practice sharing platform, which is not limited to digital tools, where we just put those kind of solutions in. And then we have like a very active developer community, which meets every month. And it's driven by the users, where they bring up topics what they developed, what worked well, and we try to leverage it from that perspective.
Got it. So we talked about like, you know, solving pain points, governance, and whatnot. But how do you define the roadmap? Mm-hmm. What are some of the ingredients that go into defining that roadmap? Like, hey, we're gonna go after these use cases or these sites because there can be different lens, value, and whatnot. So if you can share with some of the audience, how does that work at BD?
Yeah, let's say I think for us in general, EDHR is a top priority at BD. It's a strategic initiative, so this goes first of every other use case, and then we're basically driven by a roadmap for EDHR, where we go by size of a site, impact, but also take factors into account. Like we have at least three different ERP systems, there might be even more, and there's like certain attempts to move those, so we try to align our roadmap with them moving there, if it makes sense. Other priorities on the sides like audits, and that gives us more of a structure on the roadmap for EDHR. And to be honest, on the other use cases, we're currently most of the time in a situation where we had like a citizen developer. If a site found it beneficial developing it, then we were able to support it in parallel. I think as it grows, it will become more that we have like an intake process where we make decisions what adds most values and drive it from there.
So as part of that intake process, like I know like some of the system changes, like ERP rollout, like you take that into account, maybe some other factors, but the value, like as part of the intake process, do you put together a business case? How do we track the value of that? Can you?
I'd say we recently changed it. Let's say initially we started with in-depth business cases, so we basically had to prove that our cost savings basically give a payback within 1 to 2 years of our projects. We just recently said that the use cases, the paybacks are always seem to be there. So we accept that we can actually go along for EDHR without extra business cases. Actually, it's a strategic initiative that simplifies the process actually to execute those.
Yeah, and some of the real-time data that you spoke, like initially it was in papers, and now we had Tulip where we digitize that data. Capturing of that real-time data, like OLE, you alluded to earlier. What reaction that has created the sites? Has it created like some pull at different sites? Like, hey, we see this other site is doing all these things. When are we gonna be doing all that?
I think I have two anecdotes. One maybe just a little bit adjacent to the topic when we did this development during the Kaizen project. We had site leaders from other sites visiting, and when the question came up from the other site leader who implements Tulip, why did the central team build this app for you? Why didn't you do it yourself? To the site leader I was with, because they said, you should have your own team. So they basically pushed each other a little bit like, you should do these things by yourself. And I think the other experience just recently is we introduced or went live with EDHR on one of our sites close to our fiscal year end. Okay. And the first question actually was now that we have this wonderful data, can we actually get the data of open work orders and understand better where product is on the floor? So actually immediately, we actually focused on EDHR, but it generated some visibility the site leadership immediately used to their benefit on top of that. So
yeah, so like a light bulb go, oh, wow, we got this, but based on this, I think we can do these 3 other things.
Exactly.
Why are we not doing it?
Yeah.
So. Okay. I think I heard something similar in the talk yesterday by Avon, like when the CEO happened to be at that Kaizen, and you're like, oh, you can get all this data. That means we can move much more faster. So that was a good problem to have. But nevertheless, when the CEO or leadership asks you, like, it put you under a little bit of timeline.
I think we see that on other sides. We just went, especially in reagent manufacturing, I think they save a lot of time, actually much more than they originally expected in the manufacturing, and it just gives so much more stability to the process in regards to timers for reaction time, calculations, and all this nice work.
So I know we have a few minutes left, but I wanted to make sure what were the key takeaways? Like there are folks who are in different phases of their journey. Some are more mature, some are like just starting, and some are maybe in the middle. Like what would you share as your key takeaways during your journey over the last few years on Tulip?
Yeah, I think the key for me is always, let's say what I mentioned earlier, start simple. I think another problem in operations often is make sure that the resources have a bandwidth to do it. There's often the risk that you want to use engineers, and I think that's the right approach, but they have so many other projects, so make sure they really have the time to do what you want them to do. Make sure that the local leadership is not only supporting it, but actively supporting it. So I think being actively on the floor, asking questions about how it's going, inspiring the team is very helpful. And I think now it's 4, normally should do 3 points. But I think getting the early alignment with quality to understand what's coming. I said it's like, it's a shift because let's say batch records look different in Tulip than they're used to. So getting them early on board to understand what it looks like, taking the time to explain it so you don't have issues at the 11th hour when you're about to go live.
Right. And one of the key factors you mentioned, like the leadership alignment and make sure they're actively involved. Have you seen a shift? Like initially they were like, oh, we got to do this and this is what we need. And once they start seeing the value, they became champions. And
I see that. And I think what's even more important for me is that because the processes are different, that the site leadership has a clear vision of what they want in the end. So I have sites where basically stakeholders feeding in feedback as we go. And Tulip is so great that things can be changed quickly, but when you have like the risk of scope creep, but if you have a leadership who has a very strong vision what the end state is and can communicate that clearly, it's just helpful. I compare it always a little bit to the lean journey where you have to have people who have a clear vision and support that in the daily doing, making clear that going digital is what we want to do.
Right, yeah, not doing digitization for the sake of digitization, but having a clear problem statement and solving that. Yeah. No, thanks for taking the time, and with that, we can open up for questions.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for. First of all, thank you for sharing your experience. I have a two-part question. Don't worry, it's not a difficult one. First is, I'll ask them both at the same time. The first is this run through a tech ops function or more central, coordinated through IT and manufacturing. The second is, you mentioned a 1 to 2 year ROI. We're seeing companies want to get a faster ROI. How are you addressing that?
So first is the easier, I guess. So it's actually run into more like an OT-like organization. So the software is not part of our IT infrastructure. So it's supported by the business, was also driven what we call the businesses with sites wanted Tulip as a solution, and that's how we implement it. So we have a central team, but we also have like local champions on each site supporting it. But we're working strongly with the plant IT and those key members. And then the second question on how to even be faster. I think the challenge we're seeing with faster ROI is that a lot of what we really calculate as savings must be really hard savings. So a lot of the savings you see, like capacity increases, it just really count if you save overtime and things like that. So I'm not sure if I have a good answer for even how to speed it even up. I'm sorry.
If no more questions, please take a moment to applaud the speakers for today.